Amid rising geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific, several nations have assessed that the risk of conflict is increasing. Alarm is growing over Chinese belligerence. Defense budgets have surged, and long-range strike capabilities are universally valued. Now Beijing is hit out at Washington. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said Beijing firmly opposes the United States' attempt to deploy a medium-range missile system in the Asia-Pacific region. As per the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Indo-Pacific region is at the cusp of a new missile age, driven by perceptions of rising insecurity. Short to intermediate range surface-to-surface missile systems are quickly proliferating in the region. My name is Kaur Saroya, and to discuss this, we are being joined by Collins Chong Yew Keat, Foreign Affairs and Strategy and Security expert from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Now, Mr. Collins, I want to start by asking you, given the current geopolitical dynamics, how do you assess the security situation in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, we have seen how the Beijing has condemned this intent by Washington to deploy this missile system, but then we have seen also the quite hypocritical nature of Beijing to condemn this, because we have known that they have also conducted a ground-based mid-course missile interception test last year, having its own missile system, and that we have seen now this move by Washington is, of course, with Beijing in mind, of course, also with Pyongyang in mind as well, being the easiest narrative being put forward as a deterrent against Pyongyang's threats against Japan and other allies in the region, including the Philippines and Taiwan, of course. So we have seen also how over the past few years, Beijing has exponentially increased its missile defense system, and that is currently almost on par with the US in terms of the capacities. Beijing has its own HQ-9, HQ-19 systems, also having this Russian missile system, air defense system, the S-300 and the S-400. So although US currently has more ICBMs, nuclear warheads at Beijing, we have seen how China has increased its capacity in terms of almost matching Washington's capacity. And of course, the Americans realize this, and that there's this the gap in terms of being increasing the need to ensure that the US stays ahead in terms of these missile capacities with China, especially China having this more momentum for the past couple of years in terms of developing hypersonic missile capacity and space defense. So I'm sure that, of course, US has to move fast, and of course the notion of placing this new Typhoon system, whether it's in Guam or Japan, of course Beijing will feel threatened, and it is almost similar to the past incident of the THAAD missile system in South Korea, for example. So of course we can see how China is trying to portray this narrative in favor of its own strategic gains.
Right, Mr. Collins, let's just break this down further. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and you've touched on this as well, the Indo-Pacific, it's on the cusp of a new missile age. It's, of course, driven by perceptions of rising insecurity, the factors of which you have explained. I just want to understand, what do you think could have triggered this? Is it solely China's assertiveness and growing ambitions in the region?
Well, of course, that forms a huge part of the whole security dilemma. Of course, Beijing has condemned the perceived actions being taken by Washington in having in forcing the region to take sides, and of course also Wang Yi has gone around for the past couple of years in his own defense diplomacy, and encouraging regional partners not to be bought over in terms of Americans wanting them to choose a side. But of course we know that all these growing regional fears, wariness, are in large part being driven by Beijing's own assertiveness, bellicosity in the region, as well happened in South China Sea for the past couple of months with Manila. And of course, we have seen different individual, even regional-based alliances or moves or maneuvers being developed for the past couple of months in terms of having these greater deterrent efforts against Beijing. We have seen this surplus of reciprocal access agreement between Manila and Tokyo. And now we have seen Quad now in place. Also, all these are not entirely driven by Washington. Of course, they are also partly driven by regional players' own intent from Beijing. Of course, also other than Beijing, we have also seen the conventional systemic threat from Pyongyang, and Moscow in a way feel threatened in that region. Of course, other than different issues with regional players, including Japan. So China is in a large part at the center of the equation of neo-power parity. and that and what has happened for the past many years has produced these natural tendencies for regional players to feel threatened, and that they are in turn having this need to of course increase deterrent support from the West, from of course America, and that this is the ripple effect of what China has done in the region in terms of militarization, in terms of this increased bellicosity in the region. Although the Chinese President Xi Jinping has promised during the term of under the former President Obama that China would not militarize South China Sea. We have seen how that has fallen apart. So this is, in turn, a new strategic security dilemma.
Right, sir. Now, in fact, just coming back to the missiles, you mentioned this as well, short to intermediate range, surface-to-surface missile systems. These are quickly proliferating in the region. Now, what do you think this proliferation of missiles, how do you think this will impact the security situation going forward?
Yes, of course, we have seen how the new warfare and the threats of these new missile systems, and of course, China has been upping the ante in terms of developing more capacity in space, and that all in turn will aggravate the already volatile security situation in the region. And of course, knowing that regional players, including Southeast Asian players, have lacked this capacity all along in terms of matching Beijing's support and deterrence, and of course also having to count into U.S. Current allies in the region, especially Japan, and that although not being directly involved in the South China Sea dispute, but we have seen how the vast momentum that Beijing has now, and also the future intent of China to increase its nuclear warheads by the end of this decade to 1,500, and nearly equaling the capacities of the U.S. And that of course developing sea-based, land-based missile launcher system, and U.S. has been lacking in developing these hypersonic capacities against what the Chinese forces have done since last year. And of course, we have seen how Washington will now need to bridge the gap and to also send a reassuring message to allies, including Japan and South Korea, and also other regional players that U.S. will not turn against their back. And although it has been distracted by Middle East, by Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific, the Asia-Pacific, as what Beijing has called it, and of course the South China Sea dispute will remain at the center stage of Washington's clear, unwavering intent of preserving the rules-based order and providing a reassuring tone to regional members.
All right. Well, Mr. Collins, thank you so much for your insights on this, and thank you so much for joining us on WION The World is One.
Thank you very much.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.